Sorry about that, everybody. We had a last-minute technical difficulty, but as always, we will adapt. So let's go ahead and get started. For guests and visitors, my name is Steve Perley, Club President, and I'd like to welcome you all to the 25th meeting of the 47th year of the Dublin Worthington Rotary Club. I'd also like to remind everyone that we are in Worthington, Ohio, and the city does currently have a mask mandate in place, so since most of us aren't eating, let's try to keep the masks on. And now, the invocation and pledge of allegiance will be offered by Jerry.
Take an attitude of prayer, please. As we pray to a higher power, let us start a new year rededicating ourselves to our club, to serving our city, our state, our country, and the world. Help us recognize the needs of others and give us the wisdom to know how to help. Give us the energy to complete our tasks of service and give us the resources for the homeless, we thank you for what you have provided. Help us to use your blessings wisely. For this and whatever is on our hearts, we all say, Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jerry. Since Teresa's online and we've got technical difficulties, I'm going to let you off the hook, Teresa. Let's see, do we have any guests today? I believe we do. Mr. Dave Hanson?
Yes, I'm very pleased to have with us again this week my daughter Vanessa, who is working on a master's degree at Emory University.
Fantastic. Welcome back to that. And I don't see any other guests. Our speaker will be introduced in a little bit by Dave. Perfect. So we'll go right to our sergeant, Mr. Phil Giesler.
Thank you.
Well, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. 47th year. 47. I know there's some here. There's a couple of them. Yep. Back. Yep. Two. Matter of fact, well, I'll get to you later. Yeah, George. You haven't done anything in 47 years. Carry the pot. And tell us who else is here. If you need his name, I'll give it to you. Who is an original member of the club?
Yes.
Yeah, I know you are. Can you remember Dick's name? Or is it gone already?
Dick a little.
Yeah, okay, you got it. You only put a $1 in. George, put $1 in. Actually, George and Dick, and we still have about 4 others, right? 5 others that are 5 others. Okay, 5. Total 5, including Sam. And Sam is not. No, we don't have anybody on Zoom, do we? No, not right now. Okay, so George, just put $1 in and then get ready to motivate. Thank you for being here, George. Thank you, Dick, for 47 years plus. Happy dollars would be appropriate. Dick.
My granddaughter and her boyfriend decided to drive I-95 from Hill to University of Maryland because he had an interview this morning. The 3.5-hour trip only took 12 and a half. They made a statement. That's $1. The other happy dollar is that I have heard nothing but praise for the quality of our poinsettias this year. There's $1 for that.
Congratulations. So both things, and especially the both things are great. Any other happy dollars? Yes, Jim?
I have 3 for Ohio State University. One, of course, is the Rose Bowl. Second is the basketball team is already at 13th place. Third,
Good. Good. Thank you very much. We look forward to the latter first and the expectations of the second one later here, hopefully. Anything else? Happy dollars. Ro, I know you have some happy dollars because you probably have, I don't know, 10 or 15 people on one of your worldwide tours right now.
Well, you should be happy they haven't canceled it yet.
Ro, you want to stand up? I like to do this to you whenever possible, especially when it's cold. So why would I even ask a question like that about?
It's been a rough 2 years for my business, as you all know, so yes. I'm busy, I'm booking new things, whether or not they will travel remains to be seen.
So what would that mean? That you do what for a living, and what is it? And what's the name of your company?
Under our travel, and every Thursday this month, I'm doing a webinar. If you have got my emails and you're interested, let me know. This Thursday is river cruising, next Thursday is Rocky Mountain Air. Following Thursday is Albemarle Cruise Line, and then the 4th Thursday is Alaska. So if you're interested, let me know. I'll send you the link. You can join me online at the webinar and get information. So thank you for that commercial.
You're in what? It only cost you $2. Okay. So thank you. Any other happy dollars? Yes, Mr. Katz.
since you're allowing advertisements.
For money.
Oh, that's a given.
Okay.
I have 2 tickets to Cats.
Gary Katz? Oh.
No, this is a whole lot better than that. And they're for Sunday, January the 16th. They're excellent seats, and I'll sell them to you for a bargain. I have 2 of them. If you're interested, let me know. Oh. There you go. All you gotta do is ask.
Yeah. And then see the money go to the pot that George has right now. Okay.
Now, the money goes to my sister.
Oh, okay, good.
There's for the ad.
Okay, any happy dollars? Okay, time's limited, so I wanted to also say, from here, I want to thank Paul Sinkar for going to the effort of the membership spotlight. One heck of a job. Paul is outside the room right now. No, he came back in. Good. But I wanted to thank him for that because that leads to so many different things over the next year and a half for sergeants to use. So keep reading those membership spotlights because I had 4 questions today on 4 different people that you probably never gotten the answer to, but they were in the membership spotlight. So take the opportunity to follow up on the genius that Paul put together. And that really is a wonderful, wonderful spot. So for the fact that you created such a reservoir of great information that we can use as sergeants, here's $2 for the pot. I was going to find Paul. Matter of fact, I'm still going to find Paul. Put $2 in. Last thing, any New Year's resolutioners here? Anybody put a New Year's resolution on the table? New Year's Eve? Nobody? Everybody put a buck in. Okay, having said that, enjoy the rest and be ready for membership spotlight talks in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Much appreciated, as always. All right. Keep this train moving. Who's got announcements? Go with Darnell, then Andrew. I don't know why I put this on. I should be giving it to people.
I'm filling in for Jim Farmer today, just making an announcement about Super Bowling Saturday. And to the Jim, you know, he didn't think I could do it, so he wrote it down for me. Happy holidays, Super Bowlers. Santa Elves have been busy over this past week. 5 additional lane sponsors have been sold for a total of 13, leaving only 17 more to be sold out, which is double the proceeds available for the event to fund scholarships to local college students and for vocational students in Dominican Republic. Don't miss out on this opportunity, Jim says, to provide deserving students with life-changing education. As you recall, each lane sponsor is for $100, and they're recognized on the table at their respective lanes and receive recognition in printed material handed out to all participants of the event. Thank you for those who've already become sponsors, and we look forward to filling up the rest.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to pass out a sheet for calling out greeters. So if you ever want to be a greeter for any of the meetings, I'm here. I'll lead you through it, but I'll be sitting around a sign-up sheet. Sorry. Oops.
And the sheet is a little light, so dig deep into your discipline and sign up. Jim Miller, you look like you have another.
I just want to remind folks, we are trying to get out to all the clubs in the area regarding the Super Bowling. I visited Westerville this morning, and it was quite productive. There probably is at least one, if not 2 teams, and possibly 2 lane sponsors. That's a tremendous kind of output from one club. So please do sign up. I have 3 listed with the data on about when they meet. If you can do any one of those 3, I'd appreciate it. If you can do others that you normally have contact with, please sign up for those. I only have 2 packets left, so if you do sign up, I'll make sure you get a new packet.
Thank you, Jim. Any other announcements from the room? Okay. I just want to say the holiday party was a smashing success, and I want to thank the social committee again for putting that on. It was a lot of work behind the scenes, a lot of coordination, but I think everybody that attended had a great time. I believe there's some pictures in the newsletter coming, or may have already come. Yeah. And it's on Facebook as well, so it was a great event. And then finally, the 125 Club. Every week, there's always time to support Polio Plus. So if you want to make a donation directly, go online to Rotary.org, or you can talk to Jennifer. And with that said, I think we're finally ready for our program. Dave, would you introduce our speaker today?
Yes, I'm very pleased that Monica Mao, Director of Public Safety at The Ohio State University, has agreed to come and speak to us. Monica has had a good number of years of activity, contributions to the area of public safety. She began her career at Kent State University and moved to Bowling Green State, and has been with us for the last 5 years as the Director of the Office of Public Safety. Obviously, there are lots of issues surrounding this area, on campus as well as off campus. I think that today what we're going to hear primarily is how we're attempting to address the issue of combating crime in the surrounding areas off the OSU campus. And with that, please join me in welcoming Monica.
I'm going to stay tethered, and I'll try to clip this to me, or I'll probably drop it. Is that too loud, or can you? Good?
A little higher.
A little higher? Okay. Does that sound all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thanks for having me. Kind of a last-minute invitation from Dave, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to get out of the office for an hour or so. And it was door-to-door service. He picked me up right outside of my office and brought me right here. So thank you very much. First, I'll give you a little bit of background about what public safety at Ohio State is made up of, the different departments and agencies, so you kind of know what I do. And then I'll talk for about 15 or 20 minutes about what's been going on. I would say the hottest topic right now is off-campus crime. So just east of High Street is where most of it is occurring. A lot of other issues involving public safety, but that's probably the one that's been getting the most attention over the last year. And then if you have questions about that, feel free to ask, or any topic that I didn't cover that has nothing to do with that you think might be in my area of responsibility. As Dave has mentioned, I've only been in Columbus 5 years, and so many of you know far more about the university and things that are going on. I've already gotten a couple questions like, what's going up at this corner? Honestly, I don't know. You probably know better than I do in terms of keeping up on what all the construction is. I'll go to the meetings, years in advance when they're planning it and figure out what the public safety needs are. And then I'm on to the next project, and I forget what 2 years ago we had planned for that corner until I'm driving by or we get involved. So a couple things, though, that we'll start off with is public safety at Ohio State is at the smaller state schools. So like Kent State University, where I spent the first 14 years of my career as a police officer, and Bowling Green State University, where I was chief. They combine the positions of public safety director and chief of police. Some of the bigger schools do too, if they have a broad administrative staff to help. But places like Ohio State and Michigan tend to separate those positions. And so the police chief reports to the director. And that's usually because there's more than just one department at the bigger school. There's more than just policing that makes up public safety. At Ohio State, the police division is probably the division that most people are familiar with. And we have an authorized strength of about 70 sworn officers. If you count the newest officer all the way up to our chief of police, Kimberly Spears McNatt, that's 70 sworn officers. We, like many police departments across the country in the last couple of years, we lost many folks to retirement. They retired a little bit earlier than they otherwise would have, due to all the controversy and things going on with policing. And then COVID too. COVID is the leading cause of death among police. And so that also, when COVID first hit, convinced many to retire. So we've lost many. I would say right now we have a little above 60, and we have a ways to go. We're in a constant state of hiring to bring on. We just swore in a couple on Monday, actually. And then in addition to the police division, we have Central Campus Security Services, and that's about 35 non-sworn security officers. They wear gray uniforms, look a little different than police officers. They don't carry firearms. Most of them only have pepper spray as their weapon, and they do high visibility patrols. And a lot of the service tasks that you'll see police officers do in smaller towns, like unlocking cars, jump starts, stranded vehicles, things like that. So anything that we don't think will require from the initial phone call, sworn law enforcement authority will send our non-sworn security staff to. So that's a whole nother division. And then we have Med Center Security. The Wexner Medical Center has its own security division. And those folks also do not have firearms. So they wear white shirts, but many of them do have tasers. And they work in all of the medical facilities on campus, and the OSU ECR and the main ER. And there's probably about another 40 to 60 non-sworn security officers that work in the med center. And then another division is emergency management and fire prevention. And that's all the flood plan, tornadoes. Think of anything that's an emergency that's not law enforcement. Is handled by our emergency management team, and they have to keep those plans updated. And when there's a big emergency, they open the Emergency Operations Center. And then finally, our fifth and last division is Communications and Security Technology. That's where the 911 dispatchers are. We have over 3,000 cameras. I think we're getting close to 4,000 cameras on campus now, surveillance cameras. Most of those are in public spaces, not in private office spaces or outdoors. And in that communication center, our 911 dispatchers work, but then also people that monitor those cameras. Now, we can't monitor 4,000 cameras in real time, but anything that's going on, so for example, if there's a football game, all the cameras around the stadium will be up and be monitored. And then the nice thing is when someone calls 911 and says something's going on, if we have a camera in that area, those camera monitors can pull up those cameras. And that helps our police and security officers be informed about what they're getting into. It's just a much safer way for them to respond, and it helps them determine how many officers need to go, and should they have a weapon out, or should they be, what should they be thinking about as they're approaching the scene. And that often helps, honestly, de-escalate situations if you know exactly what's occurring, because as you know, sometimes panicked callers will describe things that are not always accurate. And when you get there, you find out it's something very different than what you thought. And it's helpful for us to know exactly what's going on so we know how to respond. So each of those 5 divisions make up public safety at OSU, and each one has its own manager or director, and then those 5 people report to me. And as I said, in the police division's case, it's the chief of police. The police and security folks primarily focus on university property. Our police officers only have jurisdiction on things the university owns. Now, there are many things that there's an affiliated company. Many of you may have heard of Campus Partners. They will buy up property, and it's not, the deed is not under the Board of Trustees because it doesn't have, say, a sole purpose or mission that's core to the university, but they're interested in the property, and it will be owned by Campus Partners. Anything in Campus Partners' hands is not our jurisdiction and is the jurisdiction of city police as well as everything else off campus. And so that means we have to have a very close working relationship. Now, by small town standards, a department with 70 officers is pretty big. Most police agencies in America have 25 or fewer police officers. And so 70 is, much bigger than the average department. But when you compare that, we are in the largest city in the state and the 14th largest city in the country. The city police have about 1,800 or 1,900 police officers. And so we're dwarfed in size compared to the city police. And we have to make sure we stay well connected with the city police and what they call their Zone 4 officers. The university falls in Zone 4. And we try to get to know the Zone 4 leadership and make sure that we are well coordinated with the crime that's going on. Because as you all know, criminals don't really care which side of High Street they're on, and we have to cooperate. One of the ways we cooperate through a mutual aid agreement. Probably maybe around 2004, a mutual aid agreement was enacted where university police officers will be able to assist city police officers in a joint capacity. It's one person's full-time job right now to ride 40 hours. Their entire shift is spent across High Street in the city's jurisdiction with a city police officer, and we call that joint patrol. During high activity in fall and spring semester, when the weather's nicer, we do what we call crime interdiction, which is just like joint patrol. University officers and city officers sign up to work together, but the university pays for the overtime. And that's augmenting their normal duties, and they're out there on overtime. And so we do that to try to enhance the number of officers that are in those tightly packed off-campus student neighborhoods. So those are the traditional methods that we've used to cooperate. And then, of course, we share crime data. Anything that happens to a student off campus, the city police supervisors train their officers to notify them so they can notify us. We make sure our student advocacy folks and student life reach out to those student crime victims and give them any help or support they need. So that's kind of what has been going on traditionally at Ohio State and how things work. What happened in October of 2020, though, got the attention of a lot of our students and parents, and then leadership in the city and at the university. We had a fraternity party, and 2 local kids who were non-students that were about college age showed up to the party. As is typical often when there are folks that aren't invited, someone from the Greek-like organization is sort of appointed to approach those folks if they're causing problems or just are uninvited guests, ask them to leave. This occurred that night, and sort of an argument or scuffle occurred in the parking lot, and one of the kids that was not a student had a gun and shot one of the fraternity members, an OSU student, in the head and killed him. So this was in October of 2020. Now that was, we're going from March to October, so we're in the middle of COVID. We had just brought students back in the fall, and we're trying to do some hybrid courses. So those neighborhoods were full. I think students didn't really like the spring semester of staying home. And so in the middle of COVID, we had this serious incident and a murder. Now, the city police responded immediately, and they were able to catch the two young men that were responsible. And so the apprehension occurred quickly, but it definitely started a lot of hysteria and then focus on crime in the area. At that time, we were, maybe 5 months out from the start of COVID. You had not yet seen that spike in crime that many major cities are experiencing now. And so if you looked at the city police's statistics, burglaries, robberies, car thefts, the more serious crimes in those neighborhoods, were what the city police would have called normal for the past several years. They were at a normal rate. Of course, when a high-profile incident happens, though, everyone refocuses on crime. In one way, that was a good thing, because just because crime was normal, that doesn't necessarily mean it's acceptable, right? If we can take a new look at it or get resources to address it and push it down even further, that would be great. So where we started is we looked over a trend, a 10-year trend. 2010 to 2020, in those off-campus neighborhoods, almost every category of serious crime had gone down except auto theft for some reason. And so we were examining, why is that? What have we been doing the last 10 years? I would love to say it's all public safety and policing, but I think what really has occurred as properties have turned over, the university has bought those up. And then they have used campus partners to repurpose them. So there's a movie theater there now, the Gateway area. It looks very different for those of you that have been around a long time. That 10 years really transformed those off-campus areas. And that was probably primarily responsible. So if you had a nightclub or a bar that didn't check IDs or constantly had problems, liquor law violations, drugs being sold, anytime one of those properties came up for sale, the university would buy it, rehab it. And that is probably what really started to bring down crime. And then also better cooperation. I talked about that mutual aid agreement and all those other things that were implemented. And so when we looked at the trend, we thought, okay, the perception is crime is off the hook. The reality is crime was going down every year for the last decade in almost every major category. When something like that happens, though, it's very hard to make people understand that. And you can't ignore the feeling and the sentiment. And as I said, because if people don't feel safe, they're not going to come to school here. They're also not going to be out and engaged in the community, not enjoy their college experience. And that, in turn, is going to make things less safe if everyone stays in and panics and doesn't. So we formed a task force on community safety and well-being. President Johnson was new at the time when that occurred. She may have only been here about a month when that murder occurred. She convened a task force on community safety and well-being, and we took a look at all of the things that we could be doing to try to tighten up that partnership with the city. And although crime hadn't really been going up, what can we do to tackle this and push it down even further? So we started all of that. Now, that was in the middle of a reform era for policing and protest. And so shortly after the George Floyd incident, and so we also had to be sensitive to that. Not everyone feels safer seeing more police around. That there was a segment of students and parents who thought police were the only solution. And that, if we had one police officer for every student, that would be great with them and escort them to and from their classes. And then there were, and so you had that expectation that was unreasonable. But then you also had the flip side of that, of people that were genuinely concerned about more policing, and they feared police more than they feared crime. And although that might have been a smaller number due to demographics, it was still an important segment, and we had to listen to those concerns and figure out how do we do both. And so many of the things on the Task Force on Community Safety and Wellbeing, many of the recommendations kind of hit it from both angles. So, for example, the president funded 5 new police officers for OSU PD to try to help more in a joint capacity through our mutual aid agreement off campus. But then also funded community engagement activities between police and the community, diversity training, all sorts of other things. And so those recommendations were, before crime, there was a spike in crime when we were trying to address the problem after that murder. Fast forward about to the last summer, really, summer of 2021. That is when you then saw a real spike in crime in many cities. So the economic downturn, COVID, you can debate all day about what's really causing it, but definitely something was different, and every major city is experiencing it, and Columbus was no different. So you had crime going up, and then you also had police looking for other careers. And so you have a shortage in policing at a time when serious crime is going up, and it's almost the perfect storm at that point. That is what we started noticing in the statistics, because we would check, the city police would share statistics every week with us, and we'd take a look. The three that concern me the most and that we pay the most attention to are robberies. So that's when somebody physically takes something from you. A theft would be they, take your phone when you're not looking. A robbery is they're threatening you with force and take it from you. Burglary, someone breaking into your residence. We feel that's serious because, they typically try to do it when the students are passed out upstairs asleep at 4 a.m. But if they would encounter someone going through their stuff on the ground floor, that could be very dangerous. And then auto theft was another one. And then serious assault, what we would call aggravated assault. So more than a drunk bar fight between two people in a bar or something like that, where you may have to go to the hospital to get your injuries treated. Those are the four things we took the closest look at, and we felt if we employed strategies to combat those, because each one of those was seeing a spike in about July or August of this past year. We thought if we could combat those, the others would naturally go down, the less serious crimes. So what we started then, again, keeping in mind that Task Force on Community Safety and Wellbeing was started, 8 months earlier for a different problem. Now we had to find new strategies. So these were not necessarily part of the task force. And what we did there, because we had a shortage in police personnel, we tried to double up on the number of people that we encouraged to sign up for those overtime postings. Tried to hurry our hiring process as much as possible. You don't want to hire bad people, and you don't want to have them poorly trained, because that will affect the institution for, the whole 30 years that they're working there. But any way that we could speed up the process in ways that were more administrative in nature, we tried that. And then we bought about 20 mobile light towers that are super bright, probably honestly too bright, because they create shadows and other things. And then the permanent residents of those neighborhoods, many of them hate it. Because who wants a bright light shining in their living room all night long? It's kind of a blunt instrument and not perfect, but it definitely helps, and it makes the area look like we're paying attention to this area, and this is not where you want to break into a home or rob someone. And so with those 20 mobile light towers, we also paired them up with mobile cameras. University purchased about 9 or 10 mobile surveillance cameras that you need connectivity for permanent cameras. And so where we didn't have that, we would roll out a mobile camera and connect those back to our dispatch center. So our camera monitors could monitor them if the city police told them there was something going on over there. So we could provide that kind of back-end support to an overwhelmed city police force. Keep in mind, although crime was spiking in what the city calls the university district, it was going up way more and more serious ways in other parts of the city. And so policing is a public resource, and the mayor and the police chief, they have to make sure that they're allocating resources based on relative need. And although we are worried about where our students live in the university district, if that's not their greatest need, then the university needs to pitch in to help out and augment and fill that gap. And that is why the university was funding a lot of these initiatives and buying these cameras. We also partnered with businesses off campus and asked if we could put up permanent fixed cameras. If they would supply the connectivity, would it be okay if the university supplied the camera? So all in all, that ended up with about 20 mobile light towers and 20 cameras in the areas our students live just across Ty Street. And then those extra police patrols. And then we also, because there was a shortage of police in both departments, we could have paid for even more overtime, but there's no one to sign up. Police were working overtime in virtually every capacity and were burned out. And you also don't want tired police working. Some will work as much as you let them, but it's not safe to do so. And so most union contracts have limits on how many back-to-back shifts you can work. And so from there, although it wasn't our favorite solution, the only other source of personnel were non-sworn security. And so we hired 2 or 3 private security companies that the city police and my staff then coordinate to do extra high visibility patrols. For example, there's a group called Block by Block that works in Cincinnati and Philadelphia and other cities that we hired, and they wear bright orange shirts and they're out there patrolling. Community Crime Patrol might be another group that's been around a long time that some of you might be familiar with. And we basically augmented and enhanced that. Now, keep in mind, we had to use several companies. Ideally, the best is to use police officers. There's a shortage in personnel there. The next best thing would be to only have one private company, so it's better coordinated, but they're all struggling hiring people. And so no one company could get the number of patrollers that we needed. And so that really then puts the burden on my staff, which they're doing a great job of making sure if you're going to have multiple entities out there, you have to make sure they're well coordinated and doing things similarly. Anytime the university is paying for something, there's a federal law called the Clary Act that requires us to report crimes in what would be our regular patrol jurisdiction. If we're paying for it, that's our regular patrol jurisdiction. So there's a data collection element and a crime reporting element then that we had to implement for that. With all of those things stated that we have done, I would say since July and August, serious crime, those 4 big categories I talked about, has dropped by about, it depends on the week, but I would say on average, since we started this at the end of August, so if you're looking at September, October, November, and December, about 65%. So it's definitely worked. Now, many of these things are not things that we would want to do permanently forever. Ideally, you would slowly staff up a well-trained staff of police officers. The city would put bright LED bulbs in their lights, and so we'd have a more, maybe not as bright as what we have out there, but much brighter than what's out there now. And those are all things, though, that take time. More permanent cameras put up instead of these mobile cameras that take up a big part of the sidewalk. But because we know that when you're working with city government, there has to be capital funds available, it takes a real partnership between the city and the university, that could take multiple years. And so we did the things in the short term that we thought would have a real impact on crime. And then we're also hoping the economy slowly recovers in some of the sectors. And hopefully crime also naturally goes down a little bit. Crime tends to always follow the way the economy is going. And so I'm hopeful that when crime naturally goes down a bit, we'll also have made some progress with the city on these longer term solutions. And there are groups meeting all the time between city leadership and university leadership to work on those while my staff coordinates the more immediate things. Another thing we're exploring, and some of the suburbs around Columbus have done this, is license plate readers. And so we are doing a trial run with a company that provides cameras that capture license plates, because most of these burglaries and robberies are committed in stolen vehicles. And unfortunately, it is younger and younger offenders. The other day, it was a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old girl in the car. High school kids tend to be, more and more often now, when the city police catch up with them, the culprits for a lot of these. So they're stealing cars. It's not hard. With the advent of food delivery services, there's no end to the number of people that leave their cars running with the keys in the car. And then someone just walks by, jumps in the car, takes off, and then they go commit a crime in the car, and you can't track them because it comes back to the owner. So we're hoping the license plate readers will help with that we're starting small with about 20 of them, and then we'll slowly expand them. And it's a pilot, so if it doesn't if we don't feel, and the city police don't feel it's helping us combat crime and catch the people responsible, then we're not on the hook for paying for it. So we're sort of exploring it on a trial basis at this point. So far, though, the city police have made quite a number of apprehensions that someone will report, hey, my car was just stolen. It takes a long time to get into what they call a national database, your plate that the car was stolen. In this Fox system, you can enter it as soon as you're taking the report. And then whatever camera it hits on, now the police can track where that car's going and stop the car. Or often they'll stop to get gas or go pick something up, and you can, catch them that way and wait for them to come back out. So This has just been a few weeks, but it's been working fairly well. And again, we want to do a longer-term study because we want to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck out of every dollar we're spending to try to make sure, because there are limited funds. There has been a lot of resources thrown into this, but we want to make sure that it's effective things, that we're not throwing everything but the kitchen sink out there and then not mindful of which things are working. I would say, though, if I had to determine what's having the greatest impact, it's probably those lights. They're not well liked, but it really makes it harder to, the perception just is very different in those areas when they're lit up at night. So far it's been successful, but we continue with university leadership to have a meeting every Monday night where we sit across the table with the city police. We take a look at every initiative and see if it's working, and we compare crime stats and make sure they're trending in the right direction. In the meantime, the city police and the university police are methodically hiring and trying to train folks to fill in the gaps of those that have retired or left. So that's really what's going on off campus. Do you have a question?
I want to thank you and all the people working for your service. Secondly, the presentation was very informative. And third, I'd like to know why the penalties aren't more severe to stymie these idiots that want to cause trouble and pain for students and families and everybody else. Why can't we make the penalty so severe that they would never think about stealing a car, going into someone's house, messing with their stuff?
Well, I'm glad you recognize that we don't control that as police, because many people are, and we do catch the same folks, you know, over and over at times, and it can be frustrating. The young man that shot and murdered that student had just bonded out on a burglary charge and had a weapon on him. I would say the real change, even when crime levels, robberies, after that murder were about normal, what was different were there were more guns involved. It used to be someone would come up and, you know, demand your wallet or act like they had a gun. Now there's younger kids with real guns. They're getting their hands on guns, or guns that look real and you can't tell. And so, you know, I definitely think there needs to be stiffer penalties in terms of at least not letting them bond out right away. If what you're trying to do is intervene, letting them back out is not necessarily intervening in their life or changing the course of their life. I also get that when a 12-year-old girl hops in a car with someone to steal a car, I don't know that I necessarily want her in prison for the next 20 years either. That seems like a waste. But having them bond out right away, or not having any meaningful punishment or check-in or counseling or support resources, education, doesn't help the situation either. And so I agree with you, it gets frustrating for police. And again, it's why many are leaving, as it just feels like you're getting all of the blame, but you are limited in what you can do, especially when you see the same folks reoffending over and over. So I would say, you know, like everything else, if it's happening in the city you live in, get a hold of city council, talk to judges, and see if there's more that can be done. Seems like things always swing, so there was definitely a bail reform initiative, and there probably was a real need for things like that. It's just when things go too far and crime goes up, then you see the unintended consequences. And so you just have to be much more thoughtful. And unfortunately, I talked to Dave on the way up here about this, I tend to equally offend people on the far left and the far right, because I try to always approach things from the sensible middle. And when you approach things from the sensible middle, it gets no political traction, and you just have both extremes hating you, which tends to be about 60% of the country now. And so it's just so hard to get people to just sit through and think it through and say, I don't know if I want a young kid spending the rest of their life in jail for hopping in a car when someone left the keys in. But at the same time, we can't have it be incentivized that they're back out on the street and there's no intervention the next day, because they will keep doing it. Do you have a question?
First, a quick question. I'm just thinking about this hopping in the car. Have there been cases of somebody calling a Lyft driver or something for a food delivery or something like that, and then an associate hopping in the car? Is that planned?
No, it's usually not that much. Yeah, it's mostly opportunistic. It's people that are out up to no good, little to lose, and are walking around and see a car running, try the door, and when it's open, they hop in and take off. Occasionally, there might be a ring or people that are out actively looking for these things. The city police have recently, we partnered with them to set up a decoy car. And so when you hop in it, they leave it running. When you hop in it, the door's locked and you can't get out. And then they can disable it right away. So as soon as you go to take off, the car stops. Now they've got you. But that takes a lot of planning because, again, you want to do those things safely. Those people could be armed that are in the car, and, you know, you want to try to almost think for that suspect so they're not putting their life unnecessarily at risk by opposing you either when you're catching them.
Yeah. And then my other question concerns qualified immunity. What is the current state of the city policy about this, and are there proposals to change qualified immunity?
There are always proposals to change that. And again, I think we've seen some examples of police doing some really bad things where it did not seem like they were held accountable. So I get the push for that. But then you also see police officers who have to make a split-second decision and a very tough job. And it's going to be hard. You don't have that, you know, after the fact 20/20 hindsight to work from. And I think that is what worries most good police officers about qualified immunity going away. If I'm honestly out here with a good heart trying my best and I have to make a split-second decision and something goes wrong and I didn't have the full knowledge or didn't know that that was a BB gun and not a real gun, you know, that I think there's a lot of fear. Now, is there a way some of those things can be curbed in a sensible way? Perhaps. But again, I think you have to be very careful because no one's going to sign up to do a tough job where you have to make life and death decisions. I think most people understand if you make a mistake, you might lose your job. You might not be allowed to be in that career anymore, but to be in prison for the rest of your life, if you didn't have criminal intent or even your agency didn't give you proper training, how do you put an agency in prison for something like that? And so I think we have to, again, approach this from the sensible middle. Anytime you're talking about police reform, I've seen my dissertation research has been police ethics. I am a big proponent of police reform in certain areas, but I also know you can't make they're human beings. You're not going to have superhuman people doing this job. And you have to expect that there's going to be human error. And you have to hold departments responsible for providing good training and the latest technology to make sure we're doing things in a safe manner. And so again, the things on both extremes worry me when we approach this, but there is a lot of room for improvement in the middle. I don't know where to start here. Do you have a question?
So what type of people were on your safety task force? Who made that up?
When the Task Force on Community Safety and Wellbeing was made up of students, faculty, staff, and parents, and lots of university leadership. So it was chaired by our Vice President of Student Life and my boss, the Vice President of Administration and Planning. And then they had a select group of parents, some that had engaged us right away after the Chase Miola incident that they had sit on the task force, and then a lot of breakout groups. So for every one of the 15 recommendations, there had to be a great breakout group to implement that. And so it expanded even further.
Great, thank you.
I was just curious, I believe you had some training or some education in the area of the social sciences. I was just wondering about where you come at it from the perspective of what is the policeman's job in terms of dealing with crime and dealing with many other issues that may arise at the same time. For example, you hear about emotionally disturbed people committing some disturbances and things. I mean, to what extent should the police be engaged in doing these types of activities as opposed to doing what officially assigned to them?
Over time, I think you saw police getting more and more duties because they're the only ones that are around 24/7. And you know when you call the police department, it's going to be staffed 24/7, whether you're calling the non-emergency number or 911. And police try to be helpful. And anything they have the room to do, they will take on extra duties. As I said, in small towns, they could jump start your car. And you might say, is that, why not call a mechanic, have an on-call mechanic service, why police? It's mostly, if there is no other city service for it, police would take it on. With social services and mental health calls, at times, there are decisions that police officers are uniquely positioned under Ohio law, and I'm sure it's similar in many other states, to do. So removing a child from a home, a police officer has to authorize that when children's services would show up. What's slang term, pink slipping, an application for emergency admission in a mental health case to a hospital. Police officers are one of the folks under Ohio law that are allowed to make that decision. Medical doctors as well, but not just any counselor or therapist or hall director can authorize that. And so because of that, and sometimes the danger involved in those calls, police officers have been involved. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't better ways to do that. For example, we're exploring ways, we're trying to use social work interns and master students to see if there are certain calls they can help us with. Now, our police officers have a lot more time to spend because we're not going call to call to call and murders on campus. We have much more time, and all of our police officers are trained in what we call crisis intervention team training. It's a 40-hour course for police on basically how to recognize mental illness as the root cause of a problem, rather than, even though they may be committing a crime, that doesn't mean it's criminal intent. And so how do you sort through that? So it goes over all the different types of mental illness, how they may act out, and while it might technically be a violation of law and why the neighbor's calling, why really what you're there for, the root cause is mental illness. So we give all our officers that training, and again, they have much more time to spend with people. And so they do a great job with it. But even so, even though we don't necessarily have a problem right now with that, we would welcome the support. Anytime we have to pink slip someone and take them to the hospital, I would love, and our officers would love, if there was an actual mental health professional who has degrees in this, and it's their full-time job, not a 40-hour training course, to back them up on that decision. But you have to have the staffing for that, and that has to be funded. And that's the difficult part, is those resources don't exist in many communities. Now, the city police does have a mobile crisis unit. It's not available all the time, but where many cities now have mental health professionals that on a limited basis can come out with police to those calls. And I think most police would welcome that, but I don't know whether there's ever going to be a time when police would be completely removed from that, because if someone doesn't, you do your best to talk them into going to a medical professional when you know they need help, or the ER with a mental health issue. But if you can't talk them into it, and they're an imminent threat to themselves or someone else, someone has to take them into custody against their will and do that safely. And that's where police come in. That a social worker or a mental health professional is not equipped to do that, nor do they want to do that if there's a risk of harm. And so I don't know that we'll ever be extracted from that, but I think if there's ever funding for other options and maybe a joint response or a tiered response, this category police are aware of, but a social worker or a mental health professional goes first, and if they need help, they can call us. Maybe the middle category is a joint response, but the mental health professional is the first contact, and we're just there as backup. And then the third tier, where police have to go first and make sure it's safe and de-escalate, and then the mental health professional can come in after that. And so, that I think is probably the best way to go, but we're definitely not there yet in most communities in America.
That was much more common 30 years ago. I worked on a mental health team that we went out jointly on all mental health calls. Which side got the call first? Maybe the call came in to the sheriff. We arranged to meet. We had a long enough relationship that we knew what the procedures would be.
Trust each other?
Yep. And we did well with hospital admissions.
Yeah.
Really knew whether or not somebody was going to get admitted.
Sure. I see funding for those services going down and the rate of mental illness going up. Now, I don't know if it's truly going up, but it's definitely, there are more people that are coming to our attention. Might be because people recognize it better now, or they're more apt to ask for help, but you see cases rising and funding going down.
Well, part of that is, part of the going up is that we have weekday hospitals.
Well, yes, since the 70s, for sure.
Did not put those or keep those services in the community.
You had nothing to fill the gap.
Yeah, and you do need to look. Now, I have a real problem with both the defund the police and you don't look at the resources Well, you're right, the answers are off, right?
Yes, I was telling Dave on the way up here, people that just carte blanche think police can do no wrong aren't very helpful to me either. But those that are for abolishing the police completely, I would love to live in a world where they're not needed, but again, we're not there yet. And then with both of those sides just argue with each other so much that we never pursue the things that will help. I keep ignoring you. Have you had a question?
I just, during your whole presentation, which was fantastic, I keep thinking about my time and with you and how I think there might have been some face cameras at some point. I don't know what was there in 2005, 2009, but they're up towards like the business cameras. And I think about all the technology you're talking about putting in, like license plate readers, these big light towers, 4,000 cameras, and I think about how that might impact the experience. And if the question ever comes up in these committee meetings about, you know, yes, we can do this, but should we do this? And
all the time. I come from, you know, again, half of my career I spent at Kent State, which was very suspicious of government intervention. And cameras were not their request, the number one request there. And so I came from a campus that was very conservative when I was a new police officer with cameras. You would always question the need. Well, now certainly times have changed a lot too in 25 years. And so by the time I got to Ohio State, I noticed a complete difference on the part of students and many faculty and staff was when something happened, they demanded the camera footage. And when we would say there isn't one there, they would say, well, why not? And so now I think that everyone's on social media and posting everything about their lives. They're just much more comfortable and they assume that they're in a constant state of surveillance and they get disappointed when they find that we don't have that little area of campus covered because we try to put, 4,000 may sound like a lot, but for a campus as large as ours with the number of buildings, that does not cover every major area, let alone off campus, to only have about 20. And so times have definitely changed on me, but we are always asking that. Same with license plate readers. Privacy is a concern. We've had people pitching us artificial intelligence and facial recognition software, things like that depending on the threat could be helpful. But we're always asking that question. Is that really the step we need to take? It's always that balance between freedom and security. When your security's threatened, you're willing to give up more of your freedom, but then when security concerns go down, you want your freedom back. And so we're always trying to be thoughtful about where we put money.
I know that Ohio State has a larger percentage of off-campus housing, 40%, 50%. Question to you is, how's your relationship with the police department? I'm hearing some back and forth between the two of you.
The city police, well, first of all, we have probably about 16,000 beds. I don't work for Student Life, so I could be getting this a little off, but about 16,000 beds on campus. And then about an equal number of students we estimate. It's hard to tell because they don't always report their addresses accurately, especially when they know there could be consequences at the university if they have a big party or do something wrong. But there's about an equal number that live in those densely populated off-campus areas. So that would be about half of your students. And then the rest live in various different places or commute. And so really, the part I'm solely responsible for, which are the half that live on campus, are just as important to us as the part that the city police are responsible for. And we have to have a tight connection. Now, where I would say there is some room for improvement is there was a period of time during all of the protests over the summer. Many of our students and faculty would sign petitions or join those protests. And there was a demand to cut ties with the city police, mostly because I don't think they understood the legalities of that. There's no way to kick the city police out of their city and out of their jurisdiction. And I don't think they really understood that the university police exist for on-campus property and that the only time city police really do much for us is directing traffic on their city streets at our events, not necessarily on campus. And so their demands were a little off because I think they didn't really understand what the state of policing was. But that really offended some folks in the city police, knowing that students or faculty signed a petition saying, cut ties with the city police, we don't like them. And I don't think they understand that, I probably get a few petitions a year from faculty and students about various different things. Some are just impossible to do and again, like they don't understand jurisdiction, but it's not representative of university leadership. And so we've had to do a lot of communicating with the city police to tell them that that's not coming from President Johnson, and, you know, you can't say 100 faculty represent the whole university. Am I done?
One more question, if there is one. There's one online. Is there any questions online?
Here, let me see if I can pull up the chat and get to these quick.
No.
Okay, all right, good.
All right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you inviting me.
Fantastic. 106, I guess we gotta get moving. Is there a raffle? There is a raffle. Mr. Sinkar. Before the raffle, I should say though, that our presentation next week will be from Jennifer Hansen. Related? No? Different Hansen. Executive Director of Dreams on Horseback, and the topic will be therapeutic applications of horseback riding. And listen to my words, I may or may not have been told that there will be a free pony ride in the parking lot. Yeah. And so now we are ready for the raffle. Please. You heard it from Jerry.
For $10, we have 666293.
293.
And for the card, the pot is now at $19, and that's 666298.
298.
Of all the times.
Hope you win.
Oh, that jacket?
Yeah.
Jacket thing, no good. All right. And finally, of course, if you will rise and join me in reciting the four-way test. Of the things we think, say, and do, first, is it true? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will be beneficial to all. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. We are adjourned.